In 1967, Joe Coulombe was drowning. His chain of convenience stores was dying a slow death in Pasadena, California. The big boys were crushing him. Safeway had unlimited money. Ralph's had hundreds of locations. 7-Eleven was expanding like wildfire. Joe had 7 tiny stores and a mountain of debt. One night, walking on the beach with his wife Alice, he said something that would change American grocery shopping forever. What if we stop competing with them entirely? What if we create something that doesn't exist? Alice looked at him like he'd lost his mind. But Joe had noticed something nobody else saw. America was changing. College graduates were exploding in numbers. People were traveling to Europe, to Asia, to South America. They were tasting foods that didn't exist in American supermarkets. They came home hungry for more. But where could they find these exotic treasures? Nowhere. That was Joe's opportunity. He would create a store for the overeducated and underpaid. The teachers, artists, journalists, young professionals who had sophisticated tastes but regular wallets. People who tasted prosciutto in Rome but couldn't afford to shop at gourmet stores. The first Trader Joe's opened on Arroyo Parkway in Pasadena. It looked insane. The employees wore loud Hawaiian shirts. The store manager was called Captain. The assistant managers were first mates. The walls were covered with cedar planks like a ship's hull. Hand-drawn signs with silly puns covered every surface. Customers walked in and thought they'd entered a theme park, not a grocery store. But the real shock was the products. Joe had scoured the world for items nobody else would carry. Bulgarian yogurt, Thai fish sauce, German spätzle, Mexican mole, Scottish shortbread, Japanese rice crackers, and wine, so much wine, from places Americans couldn't even pronounce. The prices made no sense either. How was French brie cheaper than Kraft singles at Safeway? How was this imported olive oil less than the generic brand at Ralph's? Joe had a secret. He bought directly from producers. No middlemen, no distributors. If a Bulgarian yogurt maker had extra inventory, Joe would buy it all. If a French winery had a vintage that didn't sell in Europe, Joe would take every bottle. He'd fly to Europe with an empty suitcase and come back with it full of food samples. But the early days were brutal. The first month, they averaged 12 customers per day. 12. Joe would stand at the door, greeting every single person who walked in. He knew their names, their kids' names, their dogs' names. He'd give them free samples of everything. Try this truffle oil on bread. Taste this Spanish manchego. You have to try this Thai curry sauce. Most people were confused. Where's the Wonder Bread? We don't carry it, but try this German pumpernickel. Where's the Budweiser? We don't have it, but this Belgian beer is incredible. Where's the Kraft mac and cheese? Gone. But look at this Italian truffle pasta. Customers would leave shaking their heads. Joe's accountant begged him to stock normal products. His investors threatened to pull out. His own father told him he was destroying his family's future. But Joe noticed something beautiful. Those 12 customers per day became 15, then 20, then 30. And they weren't just shopping. They were evangelizing. You won't believe what I found at this crazy store. There's this place that sells wine for $2, and it's actually good. I had authentic French cheese for less than Velveeta. The turning point came 6 months later. A food critic from the Los Angeles Times wandered into the store. She was skeptical. Another gimmicky California concept, she thought. 3 hours later, she walked out with 4 bags and a story that would change everything. Her review ran with the headline, Trader Joe's, Gourmet Food for Regular People. The next day, there was a line around the block. But Joe's real genius wasn't the products or the prices. It was the culture he created. He paid his employees double the minimum wage, unheard of in grocery retail. He gave them full benefits. He encouraged them to taste everything in the store. If an employee didn't like something, they could refuse to sell it. The result, employees who genuinely loved being there. They weren't just cashiers. They were food adventurers, recommending recipes, sharing cooking tips, enthusiastically describing products like they were selling treasures from distant lands. Joe had a rule. We're not in the grocery business. We're in the entertainment business that happens to sell food. By 1970, Trader Joe's had 5 stores and a cult following. But the real explosion came with a discovery that would become legend. Charles Shaw wine. Everyone called it $2 Chuck. Joe found a winery in California with excess inventory. Good wine. Really good wine. But they needed to move it fast. Joe made a deal. He'd buy everything if they'd let him sell it for $1.99 per bottle. The wine industry lost their minds. You can't sell wine for $2. It destroys the whole market. It's insane. In the first year, Trader Joe's sold 60 million bottles. 60 million bottles. People would drive 2 hours just to buy cases of $2 Chuck. It won blind taste tests against wines, costing 50 times more. It became a cultural phenomenon. But Joe's smartest move was what he didn't do. He didn't advertise. Not one TV commercial. Not one radio ad. Not one billboard. If we don't advertise, Joe said, we can pass those savings to customers. And if our products and service are good enough, customers will advertise for us. He was right. Trader Joe's became the most profitable grocery store per square foot in America. More profitable than Whole Foods. More profitable than Kroger. More profitable than everyone. With no advertising. As the chain grew, Joe made another radical decision. No branded products. Everything would be Trader Joe's brand. This terrified suppliers. It gave Joe enormous power, but it also meant taking huge risks. If Trader Joe's peanut butter was bad, there was no one else to blame. So Joe became obsessed with quality. He had a team of tasters who tried every single product. If it wasn't exceptional, it didn't go on the shelves. The rejection rate was 90%. 9 out of 10 products that suppliers brought to Trader Joe's were turned down. The ones that made it became legends. Cookie butter, mandarin orange chicken, everything but the bagel seasoning, cauliflower gnocchi. These weren't just products. They were cultural phenomena with their own Instagram pages and fan clubs. By 1979, Joe had built something extraordinary. But he was exhausted. The German grocery giants, the Albrecht family, who owned Aldi, approached him with an offer. They wanted to buy Trader Joe's, but keep everything exactly as it was. Keep the culture. Keep the products. Keep the Hawaiian shirts. Joe sold, but he stayed on as CEO until 1988, making sure the culture he'd built survived. And it did more than survive. It exploded. Today, Trader Joe's has 530 stores across America. Annual revenue exceeds $13 billion. They still don't advertise. They still wear Hawaiian shirts. They still have silly product names and hand-drawn signs. They still pay employees double the industry average. And they still have lines around the block. But the most beautiful part of Joe's legacy isn't the money or the stores. It's that he proved something everyone said was impossible. You could be small and beat the giants. You could be weird and be loved. You could pay employees well and still be profitable. You could refuse to advertise and still grow. You could sell quality cheaply. You could make grocery shopping fun. Joe Coulombe passed away in 2020 at age 89. At his memorial, thousands of people showed up wearing Hawaiian shirts. They weren't employees. They were customers whose lives had been touched by a man who refused to believe that grocery shopping had to be boring. A man who looked at the impossible and said, "Why not?" A man who built a $13 billion empire by doing everything wrong. Except it wasn't wrong. It was revolutionary. And it all started with 7 failing convenience stores and a crazy idea on a beach walk. The lesson? Sometimes, the best way to win is to stop playing the game everyone else is playing. Create your own game. Make your own rules. And never, ever underestimate the power of a Hawaiian shirt and a $2 bottle of wine. Because in business, as in life, the biggest risk isn't doing something different. The biggest risk is doing the same thing as everyone else. Joe Coulombe knew that. And that's why, over 50 years later, millions of Americans still line up every morning to shop at a store that shouldn't exist, buying products that shouldn't sell, from employees who shouldn't be so happy, at prices that shouldn't be possible. But they do. They are. And it is. That's the Trader Joe's miracle. That's Joe's legacy. And that's proof that one person with a vision can change an entire industry, even if that vision involves Hawaiian shirts and $2 chuck.